Good evening, folks. Welcome back to Easter Road. Full-time reaction to Hibs 0, Celtic 0. I've got Martin and Kenny with me to go over. Kenny, what I thought was obviously a disappointing afternoon for us. Just didn't get going at all. What do you make it?
Just a classic post-European night sucker punch. I mean, they had to be scraped off the park on Wednesday. Driving to the game today, I didn't think the biggest threat to Celtic was Hibs. I thought it would be their own fatigue. And that's the way it played out. The movement off the ball, a massive drop-off from Wednesday night. Even on the ball, basic passes were going out the park. And they couldn't break the lines. A lack of bravery. The likes of Palmer. I get that Palmer doesn't have pace and he uses his brain and his craft without pace, but you can't just at no point attempt to go by no one. We couldn't break the lines because we weren't being brave, and a combination of all those three things meant that for 80 minutes of the game it was completely passive. The Hibs goalkeeper had little to do. Okay, it becomes a powder keg in the last 10 minutes and you get a few things that are scrappy, but the biggest disappointment for me today, the obvious thing, is the squad depth is nowhere near where it needs to be. You can't play a 60 plus game season with 11 men. You might win the league, you're not going to win much else, and you're not going to win the league comfortably. We made 9 summer signings. How many of them could we rely on the bench today? How many of them impacted that game in any way? We're bringing on Forrest, Turnbull, Mikey Johnson, people that have been here for years and have not been regular starters. There's a reason they're not regular starters.
Yeah.
Because they've, over the tried and tested period, they can't impact the first 11, so we can't rely on them in a game like that when you need to change things up. And I don't blame Brendan Rodgers for that, because I think he was handed those 9 players when he was here originally, signing Scott Sinclair, he's signing Kolo Toure. They're his men and he's developing them into his system. We've not backed him properly. We've signed 9 projects and we've come up stuck in a game where it was so obvious we needed to freshen things up. And I think that's cost us today. Look, we need to be careful. We're probably going to go in 5 points clear, but 5 points is hardly a huge margin. We need to watch what we're doing and we need to back him in January, because I don't like the shape of the squad.
Martin, it's much the same team as Wednesday. Bernardo obviously replaced Hatate, and I like that because we were playing well. The intensity's been really good. We've started games really well, but I think the start today, after 10-15 minutes, you could almost see how the rest of the game was going to play out. It just felt like one of those days where we were laboured. We just let most of the game pass us by, and as Kenny says, we don't get any urgency until the players realise we're running out of time.
No, we've not seen it after the first 2 games in Europe. After the first 2 games, we actually had a lot of energy, because sometimes you go and play against these bigger teams in a high intensity game, and you then continue that standard and that level into the next game, the domestic game. But today, as Kenny said earlier, was exactly what we've seen quite often in the past, where on the back of a European game there's a bit of flatness. And I was a little bit surprised because the performance level was so good during the week, and of course we didn't get a disappointing result, so you think, well, that's going to give them a wee lift. But there was a real flatness from the start. We really lacked width today. I thought, we rely a lot on Maeda's pace and energy, and that was lacking today for whatever reason. That's very unlike him. And then on the other side, the Palmer, that just didn't pay off today. And I thought Bernardo was quite poor today as well. I think we looked to O'Reilly for inspiration, because he's been so good in the last few games. And I thought in fits and spells he was good today. He came alive, but there wasn't enough. Even the captain, he was slack in possession. He was a bit flat-footed at times. His distribution was poor at times.
Even likes the Carter Vickers in the ball as well. I thought really slack, really loose.
Yeah, I thought Scales was okay. And then of course Johnson goes off as well, so you lose Johnson and bring on Ralston. With all due respect to Ralston, he's no Johnson. So across the whole pitch today, there was a real flatness. And then obviously the managers recognised it. I think it was slightly earlier than when he would normally make subs. I think it was around about the 55-minute mark. He said, let's get some changes on, and it was a number of changes. But again, he said you weren't inspired by those changes. Those came on, you think, he's not really been in form recently, Forrest, Johnson. Although I do think credit to Forrest and Johnson, because we've started to get a bit, with particularly up Johnson's side, we started to get a bit of creativity and hit that byline. And how we never scored in that last 10 minutes.
Forrest has a big chance, didn't he?
Oh, the chances we had. I mean, there must have been half a dozen good chances, eh? Yeah. There was one in particular, Turnbull had the opportunity to cut across the box, or he could have shot himself, and he played into one of the defenders. They were defending for their lives. But it was disappointing that it took us until 10 minutes to go to find that energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Kenny, you're scratching your head really to think of the clear-cut chances in the game. James Forrest has a big one, obviously, it hits the bar. But didn't create enough, did not create anywhere near enough over the 90 minutes.
No, and you feel, look, good teams have people that come onto the park. They might be slightly below your starting 11, but they've got enough energy to get into your starting 11 that you don't notice much of a drop off. Bernardo's nowhere. He shouldn't be in the same park as somebody like Hatate. It would seem. If Hatate's playing today, we probably do create a lot more. And then James Forrest, that was the big moment. I was celebrating with you. I just assumed you can't miss that. Matt O'Reilly, Motherwell, 96 minutes, a harder chance than that, and he buries it because he's confident, because he's in the starting 11, because he's heads up. James Forrest has just been a peripheral figure who seems to have lost his pace. Brilliant servant for the club, but it doesn't surprise me that he flounders in the final minutes of games where everything's staring at him there, because his headspace isn't in a position whereby he's confident. Look, we're going to have to pick ourselves up quite quickly, because if you look at St Mirren, fortunately now, the one thing I would say, when the fixtures first came out, this Hibs game was a bit of a watershed, because it brought an end to what was a really unusually testing series of fixtures. And I thought at that point, if we're top of the league at that point in any way, we're in a powerful position. The reality is, let's have some perspective. If we said at the start of the season you'd be 5 clear after that, you'd have bitten your hand off for it. But it's not a huge margin, and the problem is we can't really refresh the squad. We can't refresh the squad till January. We've got some easier run of fixtures now, but we've got to somehow find a way of managing games better without being completely reliant on a handful of players, because that's what we have been up until now this season.
Martin Kenny's right, and I know that it seems like every time we drop points, people want to talk about recruitment, but there's not really any getting away from it, because that is the thing that stands out. Even when you look at the lineup today, you look at the bench and think, who are we turning to on the bench if we need something to happen? And that's what happened today. We don't look to the likes of Yang. Too many of the summer signings are either not even making squads, or let alone making an impact when they come on. And we turn to like Mikey Johnson, who hasn't kicked a ball for us for 3-4 years. Forrest, who's peripheral, as Kenny says. David Turnbull as well. All these guys have got question marks over whether they're good enough, either anymore or have ever been. And when you find yourself in a situation where you're chasing a game and it's not happened for you, you're tired after exertions for Europe, that's the opportunity for these guys to prove they can contribute and they can win a game for you. But it's not a surprise that we couldn't muster a winner.
No, and I think the bit that's really interesting, if you look at, if all your players are fit, and I know Hatate was injured today and Abada's injured as well, but there's not much beyond that with regards to your star players. And if you look at your starting 11, is almost identical to last year. Might be a slight change to that starting 11. I need to go through them to remind myself, but there is very little by way of competition in that starting 11 places, and that tells you all you need to know about the summer signings. The one bit of solace I take from today's performance is we have really performed well in the last few weeks. So if you put today's performance to one side, we've continually improved. And that's down to Brendan Rodgers, and it's down to the development of the team and development of some of the individual players. So I think try not to overthink today's result. One of the big surprises for me is Brendan Rodgers is yet to win at Easter Road. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah,
and I don't know how many games that's been, but he just doesn't like coming here for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And Hibs have got a new manager, and they get a wee lift for a new manager, but they had a poor result last week against a poor side. I think it's fair to say. So today the expectation was we would come here and get a result. I can only put it down to massive game during the week, and we talked about our players being absolutely exhausted at the end of that game. We kind of stumbled over the line during the week, didn't we? And they've only really had Thursday, Friday really, to go into the Saturday game. Maybe another day might have helped, but quite a short window to try and pick themselves up and re-energise. And I think that, as much as the personnel or the lack of strength and depth in the squad was the reason for today's result. That's my optimistic view anyway.
I'm always baffled by the inconsistency we've got at Easter Road. I can never understand why we struggle coming here. I don't really see any factors that should make it a really difficult venue for us. I don't understand it. Kenny, perspective is that we're in a good position. We've done really well to navigate most of these away games, maximum points, apart from today. Wednesday, St Mirren got to just get back to winning ways. That'll be a tough game. St Mirren have won 4-0 today. They made it difficult for us at times last season in the games against us, so we're going to have to play with a lot more speed and intensity on Wednesday night.
Yeah, I mean, they're second in the league. We've got to find some sort of... It doesn't look like Hatate's going to be around in forthcoming games. I'd be minded maybe to put a Wata in, maybe put McGregor a wee bit further forward. We need to experiment with something a little bit different from what we saw today. So that's a problem that wasn't solved today and contributed meaningfully to us not being able to win the game. But there's not a lot of options in there. Turnbull did okay when he came on against Motherwell. I thought his decision making was pretty appalling in that match, so I wouldn't be bringing him in. the reality is there's not much else to talk about because we're going to have to go with the same men again. I can't think of anyone else other than maybe the Awata McGregor dynamic that is going to change things. Look, we're at home in front of St Mirren. We're going to be overwhelming favourites. I'd imagine we'll get a reaction after that, and we do then enter into this easier spell of fixtures, which actually stretches more or less right through till the end of December. So that is in our favour. Let's keep some perspective. They were magical on Wednesday night, Celtic, that first half. I mean, that was as good even under Postecoglou, that first half was as good as anything he produced. So let's not sit here 4 days later and start berating the squad in the direction, because I don't think that's right. We need some perspective. I don't think Brendan Rodgers is to blame for the squad weakness. So look, we're in a good place, 5 points clear. We're just going to have to make sure that there's no other drop points between now and Christmas, and then he needs backed in January. The reason he left before is because he wasn't backed. He needs backed in January. He doesn't need backed by signing 5 £1 million players. He needs backed by signing 2 or 3 players at £4 or £5 million that can threaten that first 11, because they're not threatened. And that's part of the reason why we've dropped points today.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good note to end on. Like the video, comment your own thoughts on the game below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you during the week for the build up to that game against St Mirren. Thank you.